Hello, this is probably going to be a different setup than my other Star Wars Month videos because I have a family member in town and they are using my room. So I'm actually sleeping in my office / my basement. So I'm actually sitting on my air mattress right now that I've been sleeping on for the last couple days. Also, my onboard microphone that's on top of my camera has been acting a little weird lately. There's been a lot of Snap, Crackle, Pop, Rice Krispies coming from that mic, so I'm going to have to use my interview mic, which is what I'm using right now. So that's why the sound quality might be a little different, and I'm wearing headphones. So anyway, let's get into the topic at hand here. This is probably going to be a shorter video because I actually got to leave soon. This is pretty much the reason why I disabled comments for Star Wars Month. It is this video. It is this topic exactly. Are the sequels really that bad? Are the Star Wars sequels really that bad? Every time I go into a comment section, it's filled with vitriolic hate and just vomit spewing, usually in regards to these films. And obviously, I don't see like any hate on the original trilogy. I don't see as much hate on the prequel trilogy as I used to, but the sequel trilogies are the new things to hate. And that's the topic of this video. Is the sequel trilogy really that bad? And I'm just going to answer this in my personal opinion right now. And my answer is no. I do not think the sequel trilogy is that bad. And when I say that bad, I mean, people act like these are the worst films ever made. People act like this is like movie 43, Battlefield Earth type bad. And that's just not true. I mean, do they have the flaws? Yes. But guess what? Every trilogy has its flaws. The original trilogy has its flaws. The prequel trilogy definitely has its flaws. In my personal opinion, I think the prequel trilogy is the worst out of all the trilogies. I said this in my last video, but I'm just going to reiterate it here. I find it kind of hilarious how much people hate the sequel trilogy. It's kind of ridiculous. I saw someone the other day, actually this was kind of like a couple months ago, say that they thought that the animated Clone Wars movie was better than the sequel movies. And I'm sorry, but you're entitled to that opinion, but I just can't agree with that. That animated Clone Wars movie isn't even like a movie. It's just like 3 random episodes just strung together to try and make a movie. Like as an episode of the show, it's fine, but I can't even imagine going into the movie theater back in 2008, paying $10 to go into a movie theater and then sitting through that. I cannot even imagine what that was like. That's why that, I think to this day, is the worst rated Star Wars film. That's such a weird, that was just such a weird moment in Star Wars history, that the fact that they released that theatrically like that, it's clearly meant to be like television episodes. Like it's funny, like when you watch a show like SpongeBob and then you jump to the SpongeBob movies, you can tell that there's like a bump in the quality of animation and stuff like that because it's the movie. With that, like not really. the later seasons of Clone Wars, from what I've seen, look way better than that movie. Holy crap, this mic is dusty, dude. I'm inhaling this dust. I'm inhaling the dust from this mic that I haven't used in years. In my last video, I expressed it's kind of funny that people hate the Star Wars sequels. I actually did a poll on Stardust, which, if you don't know, Stardust is a social media app for movie lovers. You can follow me on there at Nicola Bricola if you want to download Stardust. It's pretty much the only social media I actively use. But I did a poll. Is the sequel trilogy really that bad? And with 58 votes, 64% of people said no, they don't think it's that bad. And 36% of people said yes, they do think it's that bad. And I'm just going to read you what I wrote in the comments section of my own poll, just to kind of make it more clean for you so it's not up to the top of my head. So this is what I said. I said, for me, I don't think they are. It amazes me when people say the sequels are worse than the prequels. I even saw someone today say that the animated Clone Wars movie was better than the sequel trilogy. I mean, come on now. Now I know people are just being ridiculous. The irony is that I think the little kids that grew up with these movies are going to grow up liking them just like the prequel kids did. But the irony is that the prequel kids have now become the boomers who hated the prequels originally, except now they hate the sequels. That's very true, because the people who grew up with the original trilogy hated the prequels. And then all the millennials were like, you guys are just boomers, you guys blah, 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 blah. Like, hey, boomer, like, chill out. Like, the prequels are not bad, blah, 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 blah. But now those millennials have now become the boomers, except they hate on the sequels. So they've become the thing that they hated. They've become the thing that they were like, hey, shut up, boomer. Like and I can already tell that the sequels do have an impact, especially on little kids. And I really do think that the little kids are going to grow up liking the sequels. I truly believe that. I mean, you know how many kids I see, you know how many little girls I see trick-or-treating as Rey on Halloween, or every time I go to a convention, there's so many Rey cosplays and Poe cosplays and Finn, like those three characters especially, and Kylo Ren. Like these are characters that have already made an impact on our pop culture, and I think they're going to stay because these characters do have some relevance to them. Now, if you want to go to the quality of movies, my plan was to watch all three sequels before coming to this video, but I've just been busy this month, so I haven't been able to do that. But I have a pretty good memory, so I'm going to just kind of ramble a little bit on what I think about each individual movie. Here's the funny thing. When you go back to December 2015, people were so ecstatic about Star Wars. People were really ecstatic about the sequel trilogy that was coming out, and people really liked Episode 7 when it came out. I still really like Episode 7. Yeah, it's kind of a retread, or it is a retread of A New Hope. It's basically just A New Hope mixed with, like, painted with a new paintbrush, like I said in my last video. But J.J. Abrams has done this before. He did it with Star Trek Into Darkness. He did it with kind of Super 8, which is basically just the Goonies meets E.T. meets whatever. Like, he likes these tribute-style films. So it didn't really bother me that it was basically just a retelling of that story, because it still introduced new ideas and new concepts and new characters, which is what I really liked. I really liked Rey, Finn, and Poe. I really liked Rey, Finn, and Poe. I really liked that trio of characters there, and I really liked to see where they were developing them. And I really think a lot of people liked and wanted to see where they were going to take these characters. Overall, I really enjoy Episode 7, and I do think it's a good movie. I do put that in my league of good Star Wars films, because I think there are good and bad Star Wars films, and Episode 7 is definitely in my good category. Yes, it's derivative, but it's not like it's not a copy. It's not as copycat as people think it is. Yes, the baseline story of like this MacGuffin that's hidden inside this droid and they have to get it, but in this empire. Yeah, I get that and all that, but I still think there's enough new concepts and new characters while still paying tribute to the old films. There's enough there to keep me happy. I remember when I saw it for the first time in theaters. I saw it opening night in theaters, and people were losing their absolute minds when it came to Episode 7. Like, they were so excited about it. It wasn't until later on, when the spinoffs came out and the sequels came out, that people started to look back on Episode 7 and say, okay, Episode 7 is bad too. And I just don't understand that. Episode 7, I think, is a good film, but that's not really a controversial opinion, I guess. My biggest controversial comes with The Last Jedi. I do like The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi is a good film, but it has its flaws. But I do think people go a little overboard with the flaws of The Last Jedi. Again, people act like it's the worst fucking movie ever made, and that's just not true. I mean, to the point where people are like, when Rose drops the bombs in the beginning of the movie, how can she drop the bombs when when there's no gravity in space? I'm like, okay, are you serious? Now you're just critiquing something just to critique it because you hate The Last Jedi so much. That's ridiculous. You're going to start critiquing physics in Star Wars now? Yeah, okay. You know what else isn't in space? Sound. Yeah, how would you like to have all these battles without sound? Imagine that. Imagine when the Death Star explodes, it's just... because that's how it would sound. Don't critique physics in a science fiction movie, just in general. Like, come on. Unless it's like crazy outlandish. But dropping bombs in space for a Star Wars film, I mean, come on. People they just want to critique something, and it just gets to the point of ridiculousness sometimes with The Last Jedi. It's funny because there are valid criticisms that come with The Last Jedi, as with all the Star Wars films, but people focus on the dumb stuff. Like, for example, like the whole Holdo maneuver when she uses light speed. Like, people are like, why don't they just do that all the time? I mean, what do you mean? Why don't they just kill their fighter pilots and just kamikaze into other ships? Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, maybe because they don't want to suicide bomb into other ships. Like, that's just... And I remember one time I got into this Twitter beef with that dude Ross from ET and like from Entertainment Tonight. We got into like this huge Twitter beef. I deleted my Twitter now, so you can't see it. I wish I still had it, but I remember I got into this long Twitter thread with this dude from Entertainment Tonight Canada or whatever, and we just got into the logistics of actual kamikaze bombing and why it's not such a good thing and blah, 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 blah. And it just got so deep to the point of ridiculousness. And then it hit me. I'm like, people are willing to go this deep into a film. Like, it got to the point of just absolute ridiculousness of us trying to like citing historical articles about why kamikaze bombing is not an effective way of winning a war and all that stuff. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, this is just a movie. Like, sometimes you got to suspend your disbelief for things like that. And it was a cool moment. And it was just, and honestly, they explain it in the other movies that you can't just do light speed. You have to map a course. And that's why it doesn't hit. That's why you have to map a course around certain things. And also, it's just a cool sequence. And if Rian Johnson did that, and they're like, why don't they just do that all the time? That's more so Rian Johnson exploiting a problem with the other Star Wars films. Yeah, why can't they do that all the time? Rian Johnson's the first one to do that and ask that question. How come no one's used light speed as a weapon? You know, he asked that question and did it. You know, so if anything, he almost brought up a problem with all the other Star Wars films rather than creating a new one with his. But there are a lot of, going back to episode 7, actually, there are a lot of just strange nitpicks people like to pull out. Like, how does Finn know how to use a lightsaber? I remember when the movie came out, like some critics were like, how does Finn know how to use a lightsaber? The dude is a stormtrooper. He's an ex-stormtrooper. He's obviously experienced with melee weapons and melee combat. So, like, when he's handed a lightsaber, he knows how to use it. He fights another stormtrooper who uses a melee weapon. So, obviously, Finn, being an ex-stormtrooper, would know how to use that melee weapon or melee weapons in general because he's a trained stormtrooper. It's not that big of a leap for him to know how to use a lightsaber, because a lightsaber is just a sword, guys. It's just like, so he obviously knows how to use a melee weapon. The dude's an ex-stormtrooper. And then another thing was, how does Rey know how to use a lightsaber in the end and all that? In the beginning of the film, it's established that she knows how to use melee weapons as well when she uses her staff to beat up Finn, because she's been fending for herself on Jakku for so long that she had to learn how to defend herself. So she's clearly trained herself in the art of combat. So that's the purpose of that scene when she's defending herself on Jakku. The whole point of that scene is to establish that she knows how to use a melee weapon, so that when she uses a melee weapon, a lightsaber, at the end of the film, it's not like out of nowhere. That's what that whole scene was about. So, like, that's just a nitpick thing that people have that I just don't, I just was like, what? But going back to episode 8, there are some flaws. I think the whole Canto Bight sequence was a little ridiculous. The whole animal cruelty subplot, and I'm saying this as an animal lover, I appreciate it. I mean, I love it when people want to give their values and bring awareness to a subject like animal cruelty. Like, I respect that, I do. But it was handled very awkwardly in The Last Jedi, and I can acknowledge that. That's a flaw I have with the film, but I don't think it derails the whole thing. I think the biggest problem people have with The Last Jedi is the portrayal of Luke. To them, Luke was this perfect hero character who had no flaws, who overcame all of his flaws, and his arc was over when Return of the Jedi hit. So after Return of the Jedi, he had no more character development because he reached his peak level of character. So he's supposed to be like this Superman character of, having no flaws, having no doubts, having no real character arc after that moment because his character arc was done. So a lot of people wanted this Luke to come out and just be the most badass Jedi of all time, and they wanted him to be, perfect in almost every way, almost like this Jesus figure. And I just don't think that would have been interesting to me. I think, here's the thing, going in with Luke, I think their heart was in the right place. The whole idea of the reclusive former master who gives up his old way of life and then something comes along that brings him back into the fold. That is a cliche that's been around for, I don't even want to say cliche. It's more of a trope that's been around for years in storytelling. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but if you watch a lot of samurai films, there's this trope of the reclusive master who has given up, who used to be the best and everything, but he's given up because he's down on his luck now. And then usually a young soul comes along to change his heart, or something occurs. He's retired on the farm or whatever, and then something happens that gets him back into that mode. And it's the reluctant hero. That whole trope has been around in storytelling forever. I can't think of many off the top of my head. I'll probably put in some text here to show how many times that's been in a movie, but the only thing I can think of in my head was that former firebending master who taught Aang how to firebend in the Avatar, The Last Airbender. I can't remember his name, but I remember that there was a firebending master who was wanted by the Fire Nation, and he gave up firebending and everything, so he vowed never to teach firebending again. And then Aang comes along, the Avatar comes along, and he reluctantly gets back into his role as a firebending master. That's kind of what they were going with Luke. But I understand that there are flaws with that as well. I think fans would have been more perceptive of this notion if the reason he went into this reclusive, reluctant state wasn't, this kind of weird he said, she said kind of scenario with Ben Solo. I think that's really strange. I think it would have been better if, and I'm not trying to write my own script here, but I think it would have been better if he found a love. What if they brought in Mara Jade, from the comic books or from the expanded universe or from the Legends universe, whatever you want to call it, and she was killed by Ben Solo, and then that's what caused him. Not just his students, but his love was also killed by Ben Solo. And maybe that's what brought him, into the reclusive kind of state in the first place, was that his whole school, all of his students were killed. But they didn't really show that in The Last Jedi. The movie made it seem like the reason he went into this reclusive state was because of this he said, she said scenario with Ben Solo, where Ben Solo said he did this and Luke Skywalker said he did this. And then it's revealed that it was somewhere in the middle. And that idea too, that there was a gray area there and not everything is black and white, which is very much the theme of The Last Jedi. I understand that. But at the same time, I feel like it would have been better if it was more tactile for the audience to grab onto. If it showed him mourning over his love who was killed and his students who were brutally murdered by Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, I think it would have been more understandable to why he's in this reclusive state. And then the whole reluctant hero coming back into the fray and saving the day. Again, that's nothing new. And I used to love the portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi, and I still do think that the portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi is something different. I think The Last Jedi is the riskiest Star Wars film because people complained after Episode 7 that they wanted something different, and then when they got something different, they complained that it was too different. And it's kind of like, guys, it's just, I get where you're coming from at some scenarios, but at the same time, it's we have to kind of, accept that this was an artistic vision from Rian Johnson that we didn't agree with. I guess because I'm a filmmaker and I love the art of film, I like film just in general more than just Star Wars. I appreciate when a director has a huge swing and a miss. I don't personally think Last Jedi was a miss, but a lot of people think it was a miss. But a lot of people just don't appreciate the swing. I can appreciate the swing, And Rian Johnson did a huge risk and a huge swing to the Star Wars franchise. And I remember when I saw The Last Jedi, I walked out of it, man. And I liked it. I saw it with my friend Mitch. We walked out of it and we're like, yeah, it was a pretty good movie. It was pretty good. And I really liked it. I'm like, cool. Can't wait for the next one, whatever. Little did I know how, I never in a million years would have thought. I remember when I walked out of Spider-Man 3, which was another movie I actually do like. I mean, there are some stupid moments in that movie, but I do like Spider-Man 3. I remember walking out of that movie and I thought to myself, I'm like, yeah, this is going to be mixed. This is going to be a mixed movie. People are not going to like this movie. There are going to be people who are not going to like this movie. Same thing with Man of Steel. That was also a very mixed film. I walked out of that film saying, yep, people are not going to like this. This is very mixed. There are some films that you can just tell are going to be very mixed when you walk out of them. I actually have a point about Man of Steel coming up soon, which I'll get to later. But I walked out of Last Jedi, and never in a million years did I think it was going to be as mixed as it was. I was so surprised how mixed Last Jedi was. It's the most divisive film of all time, in my opinion. It's got to be, right? What other film is more divisive than The Last Jedi? I mean, it's insane. Look at the critical and audience score of these movies, and they're night and day. You know what I mean? I know people who think Last Jedi is a masterpiece. What's up, Jake? How you doing? And I know other people who think it's a travesty and they hate it. What's up, Nick? I personally really like The Last Jedi. I used to think it was a masterpiece, but I've kind of, and it's hard, every time someone tried to explain to me why they didn't like The Last Jedi, a lot of it too was fan theorizing. I do plan on doing a review of WandaVision coming up, and I'm going to bring a lot of the same points up there, but people need to be a little bit careful when it comes to their fan theorizing, because episode 7 brought up a lot of questions. Who are Rey's parents? Who is Snoke? Who is this? Who is that? And I always thought, why do they have to be somebody? Like, yes, episode 7 set it up, but 8 said, you know what? I'm going to go against expectations and subvert people's expectations. I know it's sort of become like a meme now for people to say that about The Last Jedi, but it's true. It's subverted expectations. I mean, it's just a fact. It's what it did. And I appreciate that. And you know why? Because the whole idea that, like, let's take Rey, for example. Everyone was like, who is she? Who is she really, though? And I'm like, why can't Rey just be an original character? I've always said that. There's a lot of Avatar analogies coming here, but I remember when Legend of Korra came out, season 1. I remember watching it in 2012, and I remember all my friend group was like, "Who's Amon? Who is Amon? Is it Aang? Is it Zuko? It's got to be like one of these old characters. Like, is it Combustion Man? Who is Amon really? Is it the son of Aang? Like, is it like the long lost brother?" You know, and I remember in my friend group, I remember saying this. I was like, why can't Amon just be an original character? A new original character. And then when it was revealed that Amon, spoiler alert, was an original character and not just this fan service character that they brought back just because he's recognizable, I was really happy about that, you know? And I kind of felt the same way with Rey. I do feel like Rey, why couldn't she just be an original character who was on her own? Now, if you want to argue that, okay, that's fine, but she shouldn't have just been a nobody, I kind of argue that that's even better, because the whole point of The Last Jedi was basically saying that anyone can be a Jedi, and I really like that concept. I don't like the whole metachlorians thing. I think that's stupid. I like this idea that anyone can be a Jedi, and at the end of the movie, when that kid hovers the broom toward him, that's basically what the movie was saying. Anyone can be a Jedi, no matter what your background is, no matter who you are. And that's a very inspirational message. For Rey to be a nobody is very kind of inspirational, because it's like, that's almost saying now that in order for you to be important, you have to be part of his bloodline. Like, you have to be a Solo or a Skywalker or a Kenobi or a Palpatine. And it's like, why though? Why can't you just be an original, cool, new, well-written character? And I really liked that concept with Rey. But back in the day, there was 2 years in between Force Awakens and Last Jedi. People started theorizing like, oh my God, dude, it was Theorize City. It's like, Snoke is Darth Plagueis, blah, 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 blah. Rey is a Kenobi. Rey is a Skywalker. Rey and Ben are brother and sister, blah, 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 blah. It was so much theorizing to the point where I feel like people couldn't separate themselves from their own headcanon, and that when their own headcanon wasn't established as real canon, they got really upset. And obviously that's not with everybody. I mean, I feel like with WandaVision, for example, people were upset originally, but then kind of took a step back and realized, you know what? We really did read into things too much. And you can argue that episode 7 set it all up. So to have all of that set up just kind of fall flat is one thing, but I don't necessarily think it fell flat. I think it was kind of a satisfying answer, because again, I'm one of those people who appreciates risks and doesn't want fan service just for the sake of fan service or anything. Like, I really just wanted Rey to be an original character. So when it was revealed that she was an original character in episode 8, I was actually really excited about that, and really excited about that prospect, because that's what I was hoping they would do. And then, of course, they went back on it in the next movie, which we'll get to in a second. But I had a Man of Steel allegory I wanted to bring up from a while back. I used to really enjoy the portrayal of Luke, and overall, I still enjoy the portrayal of Luke in Last Jedi. I think overall, it's that whole reluctant, reclusive master who's brought back into the fray once this situation arises. Like, again, I like that trope, and I've seen it done, and this movie was just doing that, so there's nothing wrong with that per se. But it wasn't until I saw the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian that I finally understood why people didn't like The Last Jedi and why people complained about Luke's portrayal in The Last Jedi. It kind of came over me. I get it now. And here's the way I see it. I'm not a fan of Man of Steel. And let me tell you why I'm not a fan of Man of Steel. Superman is my favorite DC character. I love Superman. I think he's, you could argue that he's overrated, but I almost think he's underrated because people really never give him his due. They always call him a Boy Scout, that he's boring. That's not true. Superman is a very complex character who is a character. And then when Man of Steel came out, they turned him into this dark and brooding Superman. Like, Superman's not a dark character. Superman is not meant to be dark. He was never meant to be dark. There are dark aspects that happen to Superman in the comics. Like, there are dark storylines and dark aspects to his character and things that happen to him, of course. But at the end of the day, Superman is not Batman. He's not a dark character. You know what I mean? He's not Spawn. He is a light-hearted character. The thing with Zack Snyder's portrayal of Superman in Man of Steel, I feel like it truly didn't grasp what the character of Superman embodied. Superman would not stand idly by while buildings are being destroyed and thousands of people are dying, and he doesn't stop to save a single person. That's not what Superman does. That's just simply not what he does. That's not who Superman is. Superman isn't brooding. He isn't depressed. He isn't that. And I understand they wanted to do a different take with Superman, but to me, that's not who Superman is. To me, Man of Steel got the character of Superman very, very wrong, in my personal opinion. There are a lot of people who like that portrayal of Superman and they think it's different and they like that. That's fine. That's your opinion. But for me, Superman in those movies, meaning Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Justice League, both versions of Justice League even, because I do like the Snyder Cut, but even in the Snyder Cut, he's still a cardboard cutout of a character. He's not really developed as a character. Like, I like Henry Cavill as an actor, and I like Zack Snyder as a director, but I truly believe that Zack Snyder is more at home dealing with characters like Batman and other darker characters, you know, like the Watchmen characters. But when it comes to Superman, I feel like he just didn't fully understand what Superman means and like who Superman is as a person. Like, he wanted to do his own take, and that's fine, but for me, it fell flat. And in Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, he's not even like a character anymore. He's just like a cardboard cutout of a person with no personality, no charisma. Like, I couldn't tell you Clark's personality in those movies. I don't really know what he is. He's just sort of like this dude who goes through the motions. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I started to think about that concept with Luke. And when the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian happened, I understood it. I was like, the way I view Superman in the DC universe and how he's very ill portrayed, in my opinion, is the same way people view Luke in The Last Jedi. They viewed him as this Superman type character. And so I get it now. I get why people were upset at that. And I can totally understand that now. And I have kind of gone back on it a little bit ever since I've made this realization on the portrayal of Luke. Like I said, I do feel like his reason for shutting himself off to the world should have been better. But I don't mind his kind of pessimistic attitude that he carries. I just feel like the reason for that pessimistic attitude wasn't explored enough. But my point is, I do like The Last Jedi, but it does feel like a bottle episode. There are moments that feel like they do regress from the previous movie, but there are also moments that progress from Force Awakens. So overall, I do like The Last Jedi. And I feel like people's criticism of it, because there's so much valid criticism that people could bring up, people just focus on the dumb things. Like I said, the gravity nitpick, like bombs can't drop in space because there's less gravity and stuff. I'm like, come on, this is what you're critiquing right now, the whole kamikaze thing. Why didn't that happen? It's like there are actual things in that movie I feel like that deserve much more criticism than... I just feel like people over-criticize that film too much just because they want to hate it, because they hate it so much. They just over-criticize it. But if you look at the story as a whole, because the sequel trilogy is its own trilogy. It's its own trilogy, and it's not just meant to be a continuation. A lot of people wanted it to be a continuation of the original trilogy. And in some ways, obviously, that's very obvious because Luke and Leia and Han are in it, and I get that, but that's kind of not what it is. If you really think about it, the sequel trilogy is its own thing. It's its own new story. So I don't view the sequel trilogy as a necessary quote-unquote continuation of the original trilogy. Because yes, Luke, Leia, and Han and Chewie are in it, and C-3PO and R2-D2 and all that, they're in it, of course. So it's easy to make that comparison. But to me, the main focus are these new characters with this new story. With Kylo Ren, Rey, Finn, and Poe. These are the characters who are new. This is their story. You know what I mean? This is not Luke, Leia's, and Han's story anymore. And I kind of wish they kept with that, because I feel like when it came to the next one, Rise of Skywalker, this is the one that really dropped the ball for me. Overall, I don't think the movie is a travesty like some people do, but it's not a good movie in my opinion. I feel like a lot of people who do like it because they backtracked on a lot of the things from The Last Jedi. People didn't like that Rey was a nobody. Oh, well, they made Rey a somebody now, so problem fixed. Oh, Snoke, he was just a villain. He was just a bad guy. Oh, well, now he was a clone from the Emperor who just appears out of nowhere now. You know what I mean? So they like how Rise of Skywalker goes, against the trilogy. My battery's about to die, so I'm going to change this 1 second. All right, I'm back. Okay, what was I saying? Yeah, so the Rise of Skywalker basically just, the whole purpose of Rise of Skywalker was to do damage control to The Last Jedi because it was received so poorly by the public. Another thing, going back to episode 8 for a little bit, because I forgot to mention this, a lot of people didn't like that Snoke was just kind of a bad guy, but it's like, you got to remember that in the original trilogy, the Emperor was just a bad guy. So you watch these films differently, whether you watch them in chronological order or whatever, the prequels exist to you. So now you have all this backstory to the Emperor. But I want you to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's watching Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Like, imagine that, for example, where people might have been upset back then, be like, well, I thought Darth Vader was the main villain. Who's this guy now? Like, who's this random bad guy who appears out of nowhere with no backstory? Like, in the original trilogy, without the context of the prequels, because there wasn't prequel context for 20 years or whatever, the Emperor was just a bad guy. He was just a dude who was just a big bad who just existed in the movie just to be defeated. He didn't have a backstory to him. And that's kind of the same thing with Snoke, but for some reason we can't forgive that concept of Snoke just being a bad guy. Like, he's just a bad guy. The same way the Emperor is. The Emperor in the original trilogy had no backstory. He was just a bad guy who was mentioned every once in a while. And that's kind of the same thing with Snoke, but for some reason people just shit on Snoke. He basically just exists as a stepping stone for Kylo Ren to eventually be the main bad guy, which is what they were setting up for the last movie, before they completely derailed that entire movie, fired Colin Trevorrow, and did all this stuff because instead of organically wrapping up the sequel trilogy storyline of Rey, Finn, and Poe, instead of wrapping that up organically, they decided, you know what, we need to spend 95% of this movie playing damage control to Last Jedi. So we're going to fire Colin Trevorrow. We're going to bring back J.J. Abrams to kind of try and wrap this whole thing up. And then it just turned into this giant mess. I like the sequel trilogy because more than the prequel trilogy because they're just made better. I do think the prequel trilogy has some of the coolest ideas of all the Star Wars trilogy. I mean, some of them are pretty dumb, like metachlorians and stuff like that. But I just feel like the writing for the prequel trilogy was just so... It needed to be fleshed out more. Like, George Lucas is a very good idea guy, but when it comes to actually writing dialogue and writing stories, I feel like he needed someone else, like a Lawrence Kasdan, to write that. You know what I mean? Lawrence Kasdan, who came back, by the way, to write Episode 7. Lawrence Kasdan is the unsung hero of Star Wars. You know what I mean? A lot of people are like, oh, George Lucas should have, finished his vision or whatever, but it's like, I want the perspective of different filmmakers. You know what I mean? I mean, Marvel does it, so why can't Star Wars do it? And I almost feel like they did try to adopt the Marvel formula of bringing in 3 distinct different directors to kind of bring their own visual impact to it. But you got to remember, a lot of people don't even know. Episode 5 and 6 aren't even directed by George Lucas. Okay, Irvin Kershner and Richard Marquand directed Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. George Lucas has only directed 4 Star Wars movies out of the 9. You know what I mean? And yes, he had story inputs and he was a producer on it and all that. But in the end of the day, it's good to have other people's, perspective on Star Wars, and to have other people kind of tell these stories, And it's like, if it worked back in the 70s when he handed the reins to Irvin Kershner and Richard Marquand, that's fine. I mean, maybe they should have kept George Lucas on as like a consultant, and be like, okay, we're going to do these stories or whatever, maybe give your input or whatever. And because I heard that there's rumors that they kind of just threw away all of George Lucas's ideas and notes. But honestly, guys, after the prequels, I can't really blame them, because I know that the prequels have a lot of fans out there. But if you watch those films now without your nostalgia goggles, they're, in my opinion, they're not well written, and they do have some cool ideas, but overall they're very messy movies. And the reason I like the sequel trilogy is because, I mean, just from a technical level, they're better and more, put together. The first two films, I think, were really going somewhere. I really do. Even though people hate The Last Jedi because it went against their expectations and it wasn't what they wanted. Like, I feel like overall it was still good. And I'm not saying that's the only reason people don't like The Last Jedi, but I feel like people are very close-minded when it comes to that movie. But I feel like that third movie, man, Rise of Skywalker, just existed to play damage control and completely ruined so much of that story. They tried to make it about, I don't know, man, Rey, Finn, and Poe became like nothing by the third film. Finn especially got the axe so hard. Like, what was his arc? Like, his arc, he didn't even have one. Poe barely had one. And Rey was just like this void almost that, that got like turned into a Palpatine out of nowhere. When, if you read Colin Trevorrow's treatment, her parents were just random Jedi, new Jedi. And well, I kind of been where I was kind of like, all right, okay, they're Jedi. I think it would have been cooler if she was actually a nobody who was still important to the whole cause. It's like, okay, at least she's still an original character. I think in the original treatment, her name was Rey Saldana or something like that. And it was revealed that her parents were Jedi. But they weren't Kenobis. They weren't Solo. They weren't whatever. They weren't Skywalker. She wasn't a Skywalker. It's like, man, that whole movie is just such a mess. I could really pick apart Rise of Skywalker. The thing I remember about seeing it is, I remember by the time Rise of Skywalker came out, people were so kind of over Star Wars, and that's a shame, but people were. And I went to the theater with my friends to see it, and no one, you could just tell at the atmosphere in the theater, no one was excited to see that movie. No one was excited. There was one guy, I'm not kidding, there was one guy in the corner, like way in the back, who was the only guy clapping and cheering throughout that film. And it was just kind of sad. I was like, man, this is what it's come to, man. No one besides this one dude gives a shit about this story, and it's just so sad, because I feel like if they just kept the trajectory going, I feel like they really could have had something there. And but I really feel like they messed it up. And I know it sounds like I'm trashing on the sequel trilogy a lot, but I'm gonna defend it in a bit. But point is, I remember in Rise of Skywalker, there's a scene where freaking Chewie. So Chewie dies, quote unquote. Rey accidentally kills Chewie, which I remember I turned to my friends and I'm like, oh my God, what a ballsy move to do that. What a ballsy move. Like, damn, this movie's got balls. Like, the stakes are raised now in this movie. Like, damn, I kind of commend them for that. Like, we were like, wow, like, they actually did that. They had the balls to do that. Like, good on you guys for having the balls to do that. Not even 2 minutes later, Chewie is revealed to be alive. And how is he alive? He got on a second ship that no one, including the audience, nor the characters in the movie saw, and it somehow survived. That is ridiculous. You know why they didn't want to commit to that ballsy move? Is because they were so scared of the backlash from the fans of what they would get if they killed Chewie like that. A lot of people might say that's a very unceremonious death for Chewie, and they would not have liked that. But dude, I feel like that would have been such a ballsy move for them to do. Instead of just bringing him back, like, oh, it was just like this device to make you feel something for a second, only to rip that away from you 90 seconds later and reveal that he's alive. Like, that's just one of the many flaws with Rise of Skywalker. Knights of Ren, pointless. what are the Knights of Ren? Like, there's some of Luke's former students. Like, in Colin Trevorrow's, one of his 2 drafts or whatever that he wrote with other people, I think Derek Connolly was also one of the writers on that. Like, the Knights of Ren were the main villains, you know what I mean, in one of those drafts. Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren were the main villains of those drafts, and it's like, really? Like, you're just gonna then they just turn into like nothing, and they existed just to get their ass kicked by Kylo Ren at the end. Like, I don't know, man. That last one really derailed it for me. I could go on and on about Rise of Skywalker and why I don't think it's good. Or it's like I like it, but there's just so much potential. With just small tweaks, I feel like Rise of Skywalker could have been amazing, but they didn't do it. My biggest thing about it is I do like the first 2 films. I really feel like that they were going in a trajectory that was interesting to me, and that they were going to do something new and different with the Star Wars franchise. But a lot of fans don't want new and different. They want something like even Mandalorian season 2 finale, as cool as that was, and I loved it. I mean, look, play my reaction again.
No fucking way, dude. No fucking way, dude. Oh shit! Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm tearing up, bro. Oh my god!
Like, I obviously loved that reveal. I heard some critics out there say that, they brought back Luke. Like, can't we just have something that doesn't involve the original trilogy? Can't we please just have something that doesn't involve the Skywalkers or Tatooine or something? And I understand where they're coming from. I do. And I feel like with the sequel trilogy, although it is connected to the original trilogy, it still was meant to be its own thing. But by the time the 3rd one came out, it tried to be so much of we need to wrap up the prequels, original trilogy, and this sequel trilogy all in one movie, and it just got so overwhelming that they just couldn't do it, especially because 95% of that last film was trying to damage control a film that, in my opinion, didn't even need damage control. Even if you didn't like The Last Jedi, I think we could all agree, and I mean, if you've read Colin Trevorrow's treatment of Rise of Skywalker, you can all kind of agree that that would have been the better version, a better conclusion of this story, because it might not have wrapped up the original trilogy, because the original trilogy doesn't need to be wrapped up because it was already wrapped up with Return of the Jedi. The sequel trilogy is its own story, and I think if we view it as its own separate thing, I think people will like it a lot more. Even though it kind of stumbles to the finish line, at the end of the day, it's not that bad of a film franchise, in my opinion. The sequel trilogy is just really not that bad, so I really kind of feel like I had to kind of rush this video out because I got one more video after this for Star Wars Month, and I really just got to bite the bullet and do these videos. But, all right, it's been 45 minutes. I know for a fact that I forgot to mention certain things about the sequel trilogy and why I like it, and it kind of, in retrospect, it sounds like I shit on the films a lot, but I didn't. Trust me, I was highlighting the flaws because people hate them so much, and I just want you guys to understand that I understand where a lot of you are coming from. Maybe I just like it because I got what I want, and a lot of people didn't get what they wanted, but I feel like at the same time, it's like there are some certain things that I want that I didn't get when it came to the sequel trilogy, and I still like it. I just think people really, I feel like there's just so much hyperbole when it comes to Star Wars, especially the sequel trilogy, and there's so much hate that, especially with the advent of things like social media now, how big it is. I just feel like now it's just, I mean, if you go into any comment section and bring up the Star Wars sequel trilogy, people will just shit all over you, and it's just stupid. It's like, guys, the sequel trilogy is really, really not that bad. In my personal opinion, it's just really not that bad. That 3rd one really stumbles, and kind of the finish line of that 3rd one is a bit, I mean, whatever. But those first 2 films, I think, are actually really well done. They're competently made. The cinematography, especially in The Last Jedi, is like some of the best in Star Wars. Like, that's another thing. People were shitting on things like the cinematography of The Last Jedi. Like, you don't have to like Last Jedi, but you got to admit, the production design and the cinematography of The Last Jedi, that whole red and black motif throughout that entire film is awesome. And it's very much has the stamp of an artist's signature on that film, more so than, something like The Rise of Skywalker, which felt very corporate the sequel trilogy, guys. I like those first 2 films. I think are good, and I feel like even though the third one kind of stumbles to the finish line, it's not enough for me to just outright hate the series as much as people do. And by the way, send death threats to actors and actresses and directors who are involved in those films, and to shit on other people for liking or not liking them. You shouldn't do that, guys. I can't believe we live in a world now where people do this. Like, I know a lot of it's probably like these 14-year-old, 15-year-old edgelords who think that they're being cool when they do that shit. Don't do that shit, man. You know, just come on, guys. If you don't like a property, just take it like a fucking man or woman, and just don't like it in fucking silence, please. And if you want to voice your opinion, do it diligently and do it in a way that's respectful. You know what I mean? I did not shit on Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams or Kathleen Kennedy or anything, because this whole subsection of this geek culture that likes to put out these clickbaity videos to almost exacerbate this war between fans and studios and comic book companies and all this shit. Like, I hate it, dude. I hate it so much. And there are YouTubers who do that, and it really annoys me. And that is the toxic side of this community. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like the movie. That's fine. But if you want to express how much you don't like it, please do it respectfully. That's the way freaking Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel did it. Like, yes, they had very passionate opinions about movies, but they don't just they don't attack these movies at a personal level. They don't attack the directors and all that shit. I can't remember who it was, but there was a film critic, and they mentioned it when they were doing the review for Ed Wood, who would applaud at the end of every single film he watched because he knew how hard it was to make. The reason I disabled comments is because people can't be civil, and I know I'm just reiterating myself a lot here, but guys, let's just chill out, please. Let's just chill out. If people like the Last Jedi, if people like the sequel trilogy, just let them like it. Just let people like what they like. And in the end, is the sequel trilogy really that bad? In my opinion, it's not. All right, guys, this is gonna be it. I got one more video for Star Wars month. Yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. I've been recording for 51 minutes, so this is good. This has actually turned out to be the longest video I've done, which is damn. All right, there's gonna be some editing here. All right, guys, I'll see you guys later. Peace. Clever catchphrase.